Bhante, is meditation the only way to liberation? The Buddha said that to get to the heartwood of a tree, you need to go through the softwood. He said, all beings that have been liberated have gone through the same path. And so that path is the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is not just meditation, but ethics, livelihood, developing wisdom. But meditation is a key part of that path, and we need meditation to see clearly into the nature of reality, to develop the sharp mind that can see clearly. And so meditation is an essential part of the liberation process. But it's not the only part. If you know you're going to die in the short moment of time, like 5-10 minutes, what are your suggestions that we do? Good question, right? Yeah. I mean, this is actually not far-fetched at all. It could be that you have been involved in a car accident, or that you've been bitten by a snake, or that you're having a heart attack. So what should you do? So you should compose your mind. There's some good suttas about this. The Girimanda Sutta and the Bojjhanga Sutta, one of the... No. Girimanda and many suttas where disciples of the Buddha were sick or dying, and where they were given instructions to focus on things like not self, and develop different stages of meditation. However, for us, we might just want to compose the mind and use these last few moments to reflect upon our good qualities, which is something I mentioned before, to help inspire the mind. Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps on your deathbed you will suddenly, develop satipatthana, and you will develop liberating insight, who knows. But if you haven't been trained to do that, if you haven't trained in that, then it's not likely that suddenly you're going to become a great meditator at the end. Although in the suttas we see examples of this, of beings who weren't quite there yet, but who in their final moments made that leap to enlightenment. So there's hope for us yet, but those disciples were already quite well attained and highly trained. So I'd say in your final moments, you want to make peace with the past, with what's gone before. You want to let go, really let go of all that stuff in your life, family, friends, career, problems, regrets, mistakes, all of that stuff. You're going to need to let it go. You're going to have to let it go anyway, but you need to stop holding on because things are changing and they no longer matter. Maybe they never really mattered in the way that we think they did matter. So you need to let go. That's why we practice letting go. That's why when you hear teachers, good teachers say, let go, they're preparing you for that moment where you have to let go. Let go of everything. Let go of this body. Let go of this idea of me. And so you need to let go, and then I would suggest, if that doesn't, that should do something in your final moments, that should really open up your meditation practice. You could also inspire the mind by remembering all your good actions, your generosity, your kindness, your learning. You might even do some chanting. And that will help also inspire the mind. What would you do, Bhante? You've got 5 minutes to live. Meditate, yeah. And the interesting thing about the dying process is that it's the mind is starting to separate from its bodily prison. And when we hear things like, you know, people having these near-death experiences, or people who have come back from death, they talk about how there's this kind of separation that occurs where the body is being left behind. So this is something that we train for in meditation by developing the jhanas, these deep states of meditation that go beyond this bodily experience, where the mind is liberated from the body, where a good analogy that Ajahn Brahm often uses is like the frog down at the bottom of the well that thinks this is its whole world, and then gets taken up in the bucket and finds out there's a whole other world up there that it didn't know about. In the same way, we're confined to this, we believe that we're confined to this version of this body. And so the dying process hopefully should open up our mind, our eyes a little bit about what this mind is. And so yeah, there's a few things that we could do as we approach death. What if the spouse is reluctant to let one go? How should one handle this situation? So I'm not sure if this means like go to the monastic path, or just go to the shops, or go to the meditation retreat. I know that was something that came up a few times. People mentioned that they have a partner and that they have to live with them, and they have to have harmony in the house, and that married couples sometimes don't like being separated. Romantic couples don't like to be without their loved ones. So what to do? So if your relationship is excessively controlling, then it's not healthy. So if there's excessive control in your relationship, then you need to talk to people about that. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, if it's really bad. And if it's just that they want you to hang around, or they want you to cook for them, or they want you to be there with them, then you have to have an honest conversation about your needs. And so sometimes Buddhists, we get into this habit of like having really weak boundaries around our own practice. And we think we have to be always accommodating other people's needs and always just going with the flow and being easy. But this isn't the case. The Buddha encouraged people to really prioritize their practice. And the Buddha himself is an example of someone who prioritized their practice and left home, left his wife and child. And people still talk about this with utter bewilderment and confusion, and it's used by some other religions to fault the Buddha and to blame him for abandoning his family. So we should know that his family was probably well cared for. There are maybe some other monks and nuns who left their children, and maybe the children weren't so well cared for. So who knows? There was one story that I can't fully remember. I think it was a man and a woman who were both keen to ordain. I'm not sure where this story comes from, but I think it's from the Jatakas, and I remember Bhante Sujato telling it. And they were both keen to ordain, but they had children. And so they're like, oh, you know, one of us has to stay behind. Which one of us will it be? And I think they decided to wait a little while. Is that right? And then the woman says, look, I need to go out and get some food to feed the kids. And she disappears. She just does a runner. They had this agreement, and she was like, whatever, see ya. And she left. And she left him with the kids, to look after the kids. And so we have examples like this. And that might seem shocking and terrible, but when you put it into that bigger context, remember, all beings, as we heard this morning, have been our mother or our daughter or our brother or our sister. So no one's special. But we see it in this bigger picture, and we see this suffering in a bigger picture. We see the desire for liberation come out of that view, that larger view. And so that outweighs the responsibilities that you might have in this life. Your larger responsibility is to yourself and to your own spiritual growth. So that's kind of the Buddhist position. But when it comes to just like, you know, you don't want to be saying, well, I'm like the Buddha, so I'm going, you know. You still have to have relationships with these people, right? Unless you're really going. And we feel this responsibility quite keenly sometimes. It's like hooks that people put into you and they kind of pull you towards them. And, you know, maybe they guilt you or they make you feel bad. So you need to have an honest conversation with your partner about prioritizing your spiritual practice. And you need to let them know how important it is for you to do things like go on retreat. And that you've been looking after them and caring for them, and you still care for them, but you need to go away and do your practice. And that your practice will actually benefit your relationship. Because when you come back, you're feeling good, you're feeling calm and clear, you're less reactive, there'll be fewer fights. And we all need our private time and our private space to have our own adventures. And often when we come back and reconnect with people after an absence, you know, they say the heart grows fonder. And so it's really nice, you're happy to see them again. And sometimes space is really important in a relationship. So yeah, don't feel like you have to suffer in silence. You just need to have an honest conversation. And you're not asking for permission. You're letting them know that this is what you're doing. And if you need to make arrangements to care for grandchildren or children or other people, you can do that. It's manageable. So that's what I would say. See you on the next retreat. Good evening. May I ask how one can overcome compassion fatigue and recover? How one can overcome and recover from compassion fatigue? So compassion fatigue is this word that's been coined where we care too much about the world and other people's suffering, and then we become exhausted, depleted, because there's so much suffering and it's a big world. So in the Buddhist context, this is a kind of a bit of a funny thing, because when we talk about metta, love, karuna, compassion, mudita, empathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity, we talk about them in the unlimited way that these are boundless states, that they are not limited in any way. They're immeasurable. And so there's no end to love. There's no end to compassion. However, our capacity is what is limited. So we need to understand our capacity to love and have compassion. So sometimes we'll need to prioritize our own needs out of love and compassion for ourselves. We need to prioritize our downtime and our rejuvenation time, where we restore our connection to other living beings in solitude and privacy. That's where we develop the capacity to engage with others when they're suffering. And so if you're someone who is in the role of a carer, or if you are doing community work, charity work, it's okay to have a break. You're not indispensable. And if you don't have that break, then you may not be able to continue that work. You become bitter, resentful. You'll become passive-aggressive when you're doing this kind work. And so you have to watch out for that. So it's much better to take a step back, to restore yourself, and to remind yourself of care, and to do what you would advise other people to do, right? If you saw someone that was doing too much or trying too hard, you'd tell them, hey, chill out, take a step back, relax, go get a massage, look after yourself. So do that for yourself. Because when we're feeling this burnout, it's impossible for us to help others. We need to help ourselves first, and then we can help others. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then help others. So that's how you've got to think about it. Yes? Yes, very good point. You have to have wisdom. You don't want to have blind compassion, which is another problem for Buddhists, that we kind of like sometimes quite unskillful in the way we practice compassion. But that's another conversation another time. Okay. We talked a little bit about craving and sensual desire, which all of us experience. And craving, of course, contributes to rebirth and might cause a fear of death. What is the Buddhist view on craving and sensual desire? How do we proceed as how do we practitioners deal with cravings and sensual desire? Well, the Buddhist view is rather down on craving and sensual pleasure, I'm sorry to say. The craving for rebirth is one of the things that keeps us stuck in samsara. And so that's not a good thing. And craving for sense, just do it, Jacob, just do it. Just open it. Rip that Band-Aid off. And craving for sensual pleasures is the same thing. So there's 3 types of craving that keep us mired in samsara. Okay, kama tanha, which is craving for sensual pleasures, craving for ongoing existence, and vibhava tanha, and which is craving to not exist. And it's this craving which leads to rebirth, and which is the cause of us wandering about in various realms. And it's this craving mixed with sensual pleasure and delight that causes us to be stuck here in samsara. So the Buddhist view is rather down on things like sensual craving and sensual pleasures and craving. And these, of course, are listed in various categories of defilement, such as sensual craving, sensual desire, is one of the 5 hindrances. It's one of the fetters, the samyojanas, and craving for bodies, some of the higher fetters, either fine material body or a form body. These are some of the higher level samyojanas that are abandoned by various stages of enlightened beings. And so these things come up all the time in our practice, like our whole world is sensual desire, our whole world is craving. And so sometimes it's very difficult to imagine what it would be like to not have that there. And sometimes we get a glimpse of it in our meditation practice, actually, where we are not experiencing any sensual stimulation, we're not wanting anything, we're not desiring anything, we're just experiencing calm, peace, contentment. And that can be incredibly sweet and blissful. And we learn as we meditate that all of those sensual pleasures, so insubstantial, so ephemeral, and so much work. But we can get happiness not from those things, but rather from an internal source, which is not reliant upon any of those sensual pleasures, any of that craving for those things, that there's a happiness that we can find within ourselves. And so that's how we train. We train to see the drawbacks of sensual pleasures, the drawbacks of craving, and we train to see where there's an escape from that. So that's a very brief comment. What? I think that just says questions. It is a question? It is a question. It's getting a bit meta. It's getting a bit meta. I think we better finish up. So this kind of stuff is interesting to think about, and maybe the practices that we've been doing this weekend haven't explicitly addressed this in terms of sensual desire or craving. But these are really important cornerstones of Buddhist practice. And if you kind of think about the stuff that we've been doing, you'll see that the practices that we've been doing also help us understand these things, like seeing the impermanence of sensual pleasures helps us understand that maybe they're not worth chasing. Seeing this desire for a younger body, for health and well-being, this is a pointless kind of craving. It doesn't help. You can't crave youth. Well, you can, but it won't help you. You can't crave forever life. These things are pointless, and yet we spend our entire time, craving the products for the face, craving for vitamins that are going to make us healthy or whatever. We spend our entire life, trying to make these things reality, but they're just in the way of seeing the truth. Anyway, I've been talking too long and my words are starting to get confused and not come out properly, so we should finish up. And I'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock for chanting in the Metta Hall, which will be open all night long. So if you're in the middle of your night, feel like meditating, you can go to the side door and do some practice. Otherwise, there'll be some people in there at 5 o'clock. Tonight, before you go to bed, meditate and reflect upon the stuff that we talked about. Remind yourself that you might not survive the night. How have you been living? Pretty well. You've done pretty well, right? You should be quite happy. Do we do the sharing of merits before we finish? So this is a way to inspire us and something you can reflect upon as you fall asleep tonight. So we've collected so many merits today, right? So much. It overflows. And we can't keep this goodness to ourselves. We have to share it. And so we dedicate this merit from all the good actions we've done to all living beings. We chant these words together. Idam me nyati nyam hotu sukhita hontu nyateyo. Idam me nyati nyam hotu sukhita hontu nyateyo. Idam me nyati nam hotu sukhita hontu nyateyo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So for those who don't know, sadhu just means awesome, good, well done. And so now we pay respects to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Saṅghang Namami. Very good. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. Have a good night. Stay alive.